realized this month than I probably felt like any other month of the year.
Hello.
Welcome back. We are Self-Possessed.
I am David.
And I'm Craig. And we are here with our part 1 of our July wrap-up.
Mm-hmm. We read a lot of books.
We did.
This month. Probably will never happen again. At least anytime soon anyway. Yeah. We read a lot of great books. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think I felt more productive this month than I have any other month of the year as far as reading goes. Mm-hmm. Especially at the beginning of the month. You'll kind of see when we get into our part 2, my end of the month got really, really bad.
Well, we started off very strong. And then I think it was like that first week and a half we went through our first, at least a few of our first TBRs of the month. And then...
I got through both of mine in a week. Both of the 2 that I chose for myself, I got through them in a week.
Mine went really fast, except I think both of us had problems with the gift exchange. Yeah. We had problems with those books, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So
yeah, I thought that we picked good books for each other, given what we thought the other one would want to read. But then I think we both didn't necessarily enjoy the other one's picks as much.
Well, I don't want to say no, but because I think that there were some enjoyable things, but we'll talk about them soon.
Yeah. If you're joining us for the first time, in our wrap-ups, we're both teachers, so we created a book report card that we create for all of the books that we read. So rather than giving it a typical star rating, we use our book report card to kind of break down the grade in a little bit of a more detailed way. So we're going to flash our report cards up on the screen as we're talking, so you'll kind of see our scores revealed as we talk about each book, and then we'll reveal the final grade that we gave it. As we go through, we'll kind of talk about each of the areas and why we gave the grade that we gave. So,
all right.
Yeah. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You're up.
Okay. The first book that I read this month was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. This is a book that everyone was talking about, and it was all over the place, and I was excited to read it. My theme this month, was publishing world. You can't see the hating game, but they're all, like, literally all books that I chose and that were chose for me were all set in the publishing world, which was very interesting to kind of read all 3 of them pretty back to back. Though I thought I was going to love this, and by the end, I was saying, I don't know how I feel about it. I enjoyed the process of reading it, and I enjoyed the characters, for sure. I was not blown away by the ending, and I wasn't super happy with how it all kind of came together and what ultimately comes out at the end. So, I'm going to flash my report card up on the screen. So this is for The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. For plot development and pacing, I gave it an 80 out of 100. I thought the plot was interesting, but the pacing was slow. It was slow to move. I had a really hard time kind of getting further and further into it. So 80 out of 100 for that. Character development, I gave a 90 out of 100. I think that the character development was probably one of the better things about this book. The main character was really, really interesting, and all the people around her were really interesting, and I wanted to know more about her, and I didn't feel like I got quite enough of her background as we were going, but I think it was one of the strongest areas. For theme and subject matter, I gave it a 90 out of 100. 90 because the idea of the book is excellent, and it's I think in the execution where it falters a little bit. But the idea behind it, what she's trying to say, and the way she says it is really interesting. It's just doesn't always hit and like I wanted it to. Mm-hmm. Writing style, I also gave a 90. She's a very engaging writer, and the way she crafted the story was really interesting. And my last one was reader engagement, which I gave a 75. I put this book down a lot. and then would read something else or do something else and wouldn't come back to it for a couple of days. I did finish it relatively quickly, but I did put it down frequently and then had to kind of make myself pick it back up. So that gives it a total score of 85 out of 100, which is a B. So The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris for me was a B. There we go.
Okay, so I started off very strong this month with Mieko Kawakami's Heaven. And I have to say, I'm so glad that I started my July TBR with this book, because I think it set the groundwork for the whole month. I did set the whole groundwork for the whole month of just reading a lot of delightful books that I just kind of fell in love with. So I think the biggest problem people are going to have with it is that Kawakami goes into bullying to its extremes. And so if that's triggering for anybody, I would say to just kind of pull back a little bit, or just, know going into it that there are very explicit scenes of bullying in this book. But it's a young kid in school is being bullied. He finds a confidant in school too who is getting equally bullied, and they both kind of create this kind of solid, beautiful friendship throughout the whole book. It does end on a note where it ends in a place where I did not know that it was going to go to. And I have to say, with the writing, with the plot development and the pacing, the characters, the themes, and the subject matter really hit home with me. The writing style and my own engagement with it. It's not very long of a book, so I got through it pretty fast. It was just 100s all across the board. Giving this book an A+ was just, I could not wait to finish it and to talk about it. It's just one of the highlights of my month. And if anybody else has read that, please reach out, because I want to talk to somebody about this book,
because I haven't read it.
It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It's just, it took me back to kind of grade school and middle school, and if you saw the books that made this video, you'll understand why. Just a beautiful book, and I can't recommend it enough to people.
Awesome. My next one is Who is Ma Dixon by Alexandra Andrews, and I've had this on our shelf for a little bit, and I saw Gabby Reeds talk about this book, but then I never saw a review of it, and so I bought it, but then it kind of just sat on our shelf, and I was like, yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to read it. I will say this book kind of shocked me and surprised me. From the inside flap, I kind of knew a little bit about what I thought the book was about, and then it takes a very interesting turn at the end. I don't want to spoil it for anyone. I don't want to ruin it. But I think the last 50 to 75 pages of this book are worth reading the entire book. Mm-hmm. I mean, we live in a world now where, especially in thrillers, twists are standard and you have to, one-up yourself every single time you write a book. And what I think Andrews does in this book really nicely is that you think that you know the world that you're living in, you think you know these characters, and then something happens about halfway through and you're like, excuse me? What? And then those what moments keep happening. I was laying in bed reading it. When I finished it, I literally out loud was like, what the hell? I said, what the hell is going on? I was so flabbergasted by what I had read in this book, and I enjoyed it so much. I just think it was, I would recommend anyone read this, even if you're not a fan of thrillers, because it doesn't read like a thriller. It almost reads like a Hitchcock movie in a way. It has a very Hitchcock movie kind of feel to it, and was really interesting, and a really interesting character study too. So here's my report card. For plot development and pacing, I give it an 80 out of 100. As I said, the last 50 to 75 pages are where the meat of the story really is, and where I think that will hook the most people. But the beginning is slow. I'm going to warn you in advance if you're going to read it. The first 100 pages are pretty slow. They're worth it, but they're slow. So that's why I gave it an 80. Character development, I gave it a 90 out of 100. I think that the characters are really interesting and really compelling, and you learn more about them as it goes. So I gave it a 90 out of 100. Theme and subject matter, 95. Love what she was saying in the book. Love how the book was created and the ideas there. The writing style also gave a 95 because I think the writing was really interesting and was especially towards the end. It did not feel like I was reading like a pulpy thriller. It felt like I was reading like literary fiction a lot of the time because it is about a writer and a writer's assistant and their kind of the world that they are creating. So, and then engagement, I gave it a 90. I only gave it a 90 because of those first 100 pages. But after that, I finished this in I think I finished this in less than a day actually. So that means my total score for Who is Maud Dixon was a 90 out of 100, which is an A-. So Who is Maud Dixon, A-. Really seriously recommend to anyone. Even if you're not a thriller fan, I think you will enjoy it. I'm surprised it hasn't been optioned for a movie or a series or something because it would be perfect. So read it. It's great.
Good.
Yeah, and I want him to read it too.
I like it when books make you really happy.
Yeah, they did. That would make
Okay, so like I said before, I started off very strong at the beginning of this month, and it just continued to soar from there because I found probably one of my new favorite writers. It's funny because we did our best of, our half year best of, and I read this right after that, and I said, well, crap, I wish I would have read this before because it would have immediately gone onto that list, and I think it's going to go on it at our wrap up.
I feel like our end of year wrap up is going to be very different.
It's really going to change.
Yeah.
But it's Chelsea G. Summers' A Certain Hunger, and I have to tell you, it's being called like a feminist American Psycho, but I think it's so much better than American Psycho. It's just, my scores were just, again, like I said, it was just hundreds across the board, really. Chelsea G. Summers is such a fantastic writer, and she had me the whole time. And I will tell you, this is a book about cannibalism and also about, she's a food critic, the main character is. I don't know how a book about cannibalism and food can make you extremely hungry while reading it. You should be turned off by it, but no, the way that Chelsea G. Summers describes food in this, setting aside all the cannibalism that happens, it just makes you very, very hungry, and maybe that's the point.
Yeah. But
it's such a fantastic book, and it's one of my favorite characters that I've read so far this past year. That I don't know. I feel like Hollywood is going to find it and probably screw it up because I just want to hold this very dear to my heart right now because I had such a good time with it, and this it takes you on a journey. And like I said before, there are times when, in some books I like books just to have a very straight linear path, and this one kind of goes back and forth in time, which it didn't really bother me this time with this book. It kept me extremely engaged, and I think I did get through this in a day. But Chelsea G. Summers just stole my heart, and literally stole my heart and ate it. Is what she did. But just fantastic, a fantastic writer.
A+ then, right?
Overachiever. That's what I'm saying. But don't take my word for it. Read it yourself.
Yeah. Well, and he was describing that book to me as he was reading it, and then reading passages to me, and I was like, I think maybe I'm not going to read that based on what he was reading to me.
But then if you compare it to American Psycho, I think American Psycho is more gratuitous. This is just her language. I'm going to be talking about Angela Carter in another video, but it's along the same lines, and that's after I read that, I was like, oh, this reminds me of Angela Carter's work. So yeah, but that made me happy.
Good.
Made me happy. Okay.
He really did love it. He was literally gushing about it.
I never do this about any books at all.
Ever. But usually there's a problem or questions or something, and he didn't seem to complain about that one at all. So that was really interesting.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the picks we had for each other. Our last two books. We have one more after that. So my next one is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which was my TBR surprise from my husband. Mm-hmm. I'm going to preface this by saying I started the month reading a lot of thrillers. I mean, thrillers and horror are my typical go-to genre. I do love the occasional romance, especially if it's a queer romance. The Hating Game is not a queer romance. It is a straight heteronormative romance, also set in the publishing world. When I came off of those thrillers that excited me, that I really liked a lot, this one was kind of a letdown for me, if I'm honest. I don't know. I told him, your main character is supposed to be your protagonist is supposed to be the one that you're rooting for, that you like a lot, and I just didn't like her very much. I liked Joshua, the main male character, a lot. I liked him more than I liked her. He's more mysterious. He's more kind of like aloof, and she's kind of, I don't know. There's just something about her I didn't like very much. Also, the book is called The Hating Game, and I thought the majority of the book, like the first 200 pages or something like that, was going to be them like in a rivalry with each other, hating each other, really like not getting along, and then suddenly that turns. But the hatred lasts for 50 pages
almost,
and then things turn, and so the rest of it really becomes more of a romance than anything else. And so I just wasn't the biggest fan. I didn't hate it by any means, but I just wasn't the biggest fan, and probably going to be my lowest score this month. So I gave it an 80 out of 100 for plot development and pacing. I thought the plot moved and the pacing moved, but I didn't like some of the choices she made as a writer. Character development, I gave it 75. When the protagonist, to me, is the least interesting character in the book, there's a problem, I think. The theme and subject matter was 70, and that's mostly just out of an execution, because I think that the idea of the hating game is really interesting, but I don't think that was executed well. Mm-hmm. I gave it a 75 out of 100 for writing style. There's some very trite tropes in here that I didn't love. I did like how Joshua was written. I liked how her boss was written. I think that those characters were really interesting, but the writing in general was pretty, I don't know. It didn't strike me very much. And then for engagement, I gave it the lowest. I gave it a 60 out of 100 because I had a really hard time picking this back up to read it. To the point where I was making lots of drives back and forth the last couple weeks, and I finished it listening to the audiobook because I just couldn't motivate myself to pick it back up. So that gives it a total score of 72 out of 100, which for me is a C-. So Hating Game, C-. Don't be sad. It's okay.
Well, I liked it.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
But I think with that, because I think I was reading a lot of thrillers during that time, and I was like, I need a palate cleanser. And then people were always talking about this book. Yeah. I'm like, well, let me try that. And then, once I did, I was like, oh, this is nice and fluffy. It's like eating a big thing of cotton candy. I will say, it was a good palate cleanser between books. But I am fearful that this book set me up for a reading slump. Because, you'll see in our part 2, we're going to do our part 2 wrap up, which is our addendum, the books that we added to our TBR because we were already through the majority of our stuff. And I had a hard time with some of those books because I think of this book. Yeah. So what did you think of yours? Okay. So Craig gave me Baby Teeth to read. I would say I had a little bit of the same things going that Craig had with The Hating Game, but I think I liked this more than he did. It was fun for all the wrong reasons. I'm always if there's a bad child somewhere, for some reason I kind of gravitate towards that kind of energy. And this was a really, really bad child. And so that was the fun part of it. And I think what I had problems with is when there's multiple narrators and it's just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That gets a little tedious for me. And that kind of does that. But I would say it wasn't a horrible book. I gave it a B+. So the plot development and pacing, I gave it a 90. Character development, I gave it a 90 as well. Theme and subject matter, an 85. Writing style, a 90, and reader engagement, an 85. This was also a book that I kept putting down, and I think I read like the first 100 pages, and then I kind of put it down for about a week, and I read something else, and then jumping back into it. It was just a book that I kept on forgetting that it was there, but once I got into it, then I was there, but then once I got to like almost the halfway point, I was like, oh, I was getting into it. But I was expecting that for the first like 200 pages. And it wasn't until like the very end where I was starting to get into where it seemed like the story was gaining momentum, and then it kind of stopped for me anyway. But I had fun with it, because who doesn't like a scary child, screwing some stuff up, hurting people, and mothers that... It makes me respect mothers at grocery stores who are, their children are bad, and that they just want to wring their necks, and it's just like, I understand. But this child in here was just, wow, that was a lot. But, so yeah, it gave me a deeper appreciation for mothers and what they do every single day. They also called it, we need to talk about Kevin meets Gone Girl meets The Omen. Entertainment Weekly, I would say read it again. I would say maybe The Omen, but I think we need to talk about Kevin. I think that's a little bit, I don't know. I would say read that too, but yeah. So that's where I am with Baby Teeth. It was fun, but yeah, that's it.
That's okay. All right. So the last book for our wrap-up part 1 is a book that we both read together, a book that we were super excited about, and that is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. You saw this in our book haul and our TBR video. We talked about being, I think, and this is one of the most anticipated books we had of the year, right?
For a lot of people.
Yeah, and for us specifically. We were super excited to get it, and we both read it over the course of a day, right? Yeah. I read it first, and then he read it. So I liked it a lot. I am not the hugest fan of unreliable narrators. I know why they're important, and I know why you need them, and I know why in a thriller especially it's important. I had a little bit of trouble with that in this book in general, but I think as the book progressed, especially the twists and turns at the end, I really, really liked. I was able to predict some of it, but that's okay. That doesn't bother me. In fact, it makes me, it validates my sense of, like smarts for being able to figure it out. But I really enjoyed it. I liked the 90s throwback. I liked the subtle references that didn't beat us over the head for the most part. And I enjoyed the book a lot, and you did too, right?
I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah,
I did. It was less than a day. I think I read. I started reading it in one day, and then I kind of stayed up until like 3. I think, finishing it. So yeah.
Our score are pretty. They're mostly 100s across the board. The only place where we differed a little bit was on character development, where I gave it a 90. I think we both agreed that like the unreliable narrator of it, and then there was some kind of...
There was one of the twists, I was like, okay.
Right.
I didn't understand it after, like, closer to the end of how that all worked. I don't know. I had questions about it, and if you've read it and you want to talk about it,
please
reach out, please, because there was one specific part that I was like, I don't know if I would have done that if I was her, but okay.
But I think overall we both enjoyed it. We gave it an overall score of a 98 out of 100, which is an A. I would recommend this to anyone who likes a quick read, who enjoys being thrilled, who likes mystery and figuring things out. I think it works well in that vein.
Where is this on your Riley Sager favorites?
I mean, it's in the middle.
Really?
Yeah. I think Final Girls and Home Before Dark are at the top. This is probably in the middle, and then Lock Every Door and Last Time I Lied are somewhere towards the bottom. So,
okay.
Yeah.
This is at the very top for me. I wouldn't say it's number 1, but I would say it's at the very top because I do like books that there's only a few characters, so you get to really know them, and that character development gets to kind of expand, and you get to know them a lot better.
And this is it's very claustrophobic. It's very contained, mostly within a car. There is the main character. I'm not giving anything away by saying this, I don't think, but the main character has had some trauma happen to her, and then sees kind of movies in her mind and she kind of hallucinates. And so that's kind of where the unreliable narrator thing comes from, where the Sager makes you think that like you don't know what's real and what's not real. And I don't personally love that. I don't like feeling unsure of where I am or what's going on, but he does. So, but then it kind of works itself out and it actually becomes a really interesting plot device as well.
I liked the ending very, very much.
The ending was great.
The twist, not so much, but I think the ending was, I was like, it's one of those things I was like, this was worth, for me anyway, it was worth the wait for this next book. So, very tippy top of my favorites.
Well, that's our first wrap up. As I said before, we did an addendum, so I have 3 more books and you have 4 more books.
I have 4 more.
Yeah.
Well, we read some of the same things too.
Yeah.
So
so we're going to come back with a part 2. So come back in a couple of days. You'll see our part 2 wrap up where we talk about the books we added to our TBR. The reason we're splitting them up is because we didn't want to make this video
an hour.
Right. So we thought it'd be easier to split it up into 2 since we already did the addendum anyway. Mm-hmm. So you'll see that. We're going to do a quick recap of our books and our grades, and I'll kind of flash them up on the screen for you so that you can see them. My first book was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris, and that was a B. My next book was Who Was Ma Dixon, and that was an A-. And one of my last books was The Hating Game, which was a C-. And then Survive the Night was an A for me. So.
Okay, mine, let's start with Baby Teeth, which was one of my lowest grades, at least this month so far. And I gave that a B+. A Certain Hunger was A+++++++. Buy It. Heaven, I absolutely loved, and I gave that an A+ as well.
Yep.
And Survive the Night, of course. I would have given that an A+, but we read that both together, so we had to grade that together. We
had to agree, which is fine. So as you can see, I mean, that's for us compared to last month. I mean, that's 8 books essentially between the 2 of us, and that's pretty good for us in a normal month. But we have 8 more books to add to that list. So we'll be back with part 2 very soon. If you haven't, check out our Instagram.
At @shelf_possessed.
You'll see photos of the books. We'll put some reviews up there. It's a really great way to kind of keep track of what we're reading. And then if you haven't, comment below. What did you think of these books if you read them? Give the video a like. Hit the subscribe button. Share it if you can. We'll put links to all of these books down below in the description box so that if you want to purchase them, you can easily find a link to do that. So, yeah, good month so far.
Good job.
Good job. All right, we will see you next time. Thank you for coming back and joining us, and we'll see you in a few days.
Bye.
Bye.